Brother, if you are a connoisseur of scary stories, then subscribe to my channel so as not to lose it and give it a like. I will be grateful to you. Detective Lawrence entered the dimly lit interrogation room, his silhouette a dark shadow against the harsh white light that poured in through the one-way mirror. The air was heavy with an unspoken tension, as if the walls themselves held their breath. The suspect, a gaunt man with hollow eyes and sunken cheeks, sat handcuffed to the cold steel table, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Lawrence moved a chair, the legs scraping against the concrete floor with a grating sound that echoed through the silent room, before sitting down directly opposite the suspect. "Let's cut to the chase," Lawrence said, his voice a low growl. "Were you involved in the disappearance of the immediate response team and your three accomplices?" His eyes bored into the suspect's, searching for any flicker of guilt or fear. The suspect's face remained impassive, but his eyes told a different story, reflecting a darkness that seemed to grow deeper with each passing second. The suspect's voice was a hoarse whisper, his throat dry from hours of questioning. "I've told you everything I know," he rasped, his breath visible in the chilly air. "I wasn't involved. I don't know what happened to them." His hands trembled slightly as he spoke, the metal of the handcuffs clinking softly. Lawrence leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. "Let's hear it again," he demanded. "Every detail, no omissions." The suspect sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I was at the warehouse that night, but I didn't see anything unusual. My job was just to keep an eye on things, make sure no one came snooping around. It was cold, so I stayed near the heater most of the time. Around midnight, I thought I heard something outside, but when I looked, there was nothing there. Just the wind howling and the shadows moving." He paused, his eyes staring into the distance as if he could see the events replaying in front of him. "I stayed inside, didn't think much of it. Then, a couple of hours later, I heard the team arrive. They were talking about some tip-off, something about a big bust. I didn't see them after that. The next thing I knew, the place was swarming with cops, and I was being dragged out in cuffs." Lawrence's eyes narrowed. "And your accomplices? What happened to them?" The suspect shook his head slowly. "I don't know. We were supposed to meet up after the job, but they never showed. I thought they might have gotten cold feet or decided to split with the money. But now I think something else happened. Something bad." The room fell silent again, the only sound the faint buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead. Lawrence studied the suspect for a moment longer before standing up. "We'll see about that," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "We'll see." Detective Lawrence leaned forward, his eyes never leaving the suspect's face. "There are a lot of things about this case that don't add up," he said, his voice laden with suspicion. "We found signs of a struggle at the warehouse. Bullet casings scattered across the floor, shattered glass and blood. A lot of blood, but not a single body, just pieces of flesh, like something out of a horror movie. And then there's the team itself. We've tried contacting them, but it's like they vanished into thin air. No calls, no sightings. It's as if they were swallowed by the darkness." The suspect's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of fear breaking through his mask of indifference. Lawrence noted the reaction but continued. "You say you don't know what happened, but the evidence says otherwise. Something terrible went down in that warehouse, and you're the only one left who might have the answers." Lawrence stood up, pushing his chair back with a soft scrape. "I'm going to get some coffee," he said, turning towards the door. "Think about what I've said. When I come back, we're going to have a real conversation." With that, he left the room, the door closing behind him with a resounding thud. In the corridor, the detective paused, rubbing his temples. The case had been gnawing at him, the inexplicable details and eerie silence from the missing team haunting his thoughts. He grabbed a cup of bitter coffee from the break room and took a deep breath before re-entering the interrogation room. Lawrence sat down, setting the coffee cup on the table between them. "Let's cut the formalities," he said, his tone softer, almost conversational. "This case is getting under my skin. What do you say we drop the detective and suspect routine and talk, just you and me? Tell me what really happened, in detail. I need to understand." The suspect looked down at his hands, cuffed and shaking. He swallowed hard before speaking. "All right," he said, his voice trembling. "I'll tell you everything. Just promise me. Promise me. You'll believe me." Lawrence nodded, leaning in closer. "Just start from the beginning. Leave nothing out." The suspect took a deep breath. It was supposed to be a routine job. We got a tip about a big shipment, something valuable. The plan was simple: get in, grab the goods, get out. But when we got there, something was off. The air felt wrong, like it was too heavy. We set up inside the warehouse, waiting for the team to arrive. When they showed up, everything went to hell. There were sounds coming from the shadows, whispers that made no sense. Then the lights went out. He shivered, eyes darting to the corners of the room, as if expecting something to emerge from the darkness. When the lights came back on, the team was gone. Just gone. No bodies, just those pieces you found. We tried to leave, but it was like the building itself was alive, blocking our way. Doors that should have led outside just brought us back in circles. The others panicked and tried to find a way out, but one by one, they disappeared too. His voice cracked. I don't know what happened to them. Maybe it was something in the air, or maybe the warehouse was haunted. All I know is that by the time the police arrived, I was the only one left, and I couldn't explain what I saw. You have to believe me. Something beyond our understanding happened that night. Lawrence's face remained impassive, but his mind raced. Could it be true? Could there be something more sinister at play than a botched job? He didn't have the answers, but he knew one thing: he needed to get to the bottom of it, no matter the cost. The suspect, now visibly more composed, began to recount the meticulous plan they had devised for the heist. "We spent weeks planning every detail," he said, his voice steady. "There were 4 of us, Max, our leader Tony, the lookout Jake, the tech guy, and me. We cased the jewelry store for days, noting the security patterns, employee schedules, everything. The plan was simple but precise. We had strict rules: no casualties, in and out in under a minute. We knew the police response time, and we had our exit strategy down to the second." He paused, glancing at the detective to gauge his reaction. Seeing Lawrence's attentive expression, he continued. "We synchronized our watches, rehearsed our roles. Tony would signal when the coast was clear. Jake would disable the alarms and cameras. Max and I would handle the inside job. It was supposed to be clean, efficient. We weren't amateurs. We knew what we were doing, or so we thought." The suspect's voice wavered as he described the night of the heist. "Everything was going according to plan. We slipped inside the jewelry store, masks on, guns drawn, but with no intention to use them. The employees were compliant, dropping to the floor as we had instructed. The display cases were open, the diamonds and gold glittering under the fluorescent lights. It was almost too easy." He took a deep breath, his eyes growing distant as he relived the moment. Then she appeared. An old woman, probably in her 70s, emerged from the back room. She moved slowly, deliberately, like she had all the time in the world. Max shouted at her to get down, but she just stood there, staring at us with these piercing eyes. She started whispering something, but words I couldn't understand. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a handful of dust or powder and flung it into Max's face. Lawrence leaned in, intrigued. What happened next? The suspect shuddered. Max screamed. It wasn't a normal scream. It was like he was in unimaginable pain. He dropped his gun, clutching at his face, and started convulsing. The rest of us were stunned, frozen in place. The woman just kept whispering, her eyes locked on Max. Then he started changing. His eyes rolled back, his skin turned pale, almost translucent. He began to move erratically, lashing out at us, as if he was possessed. The suspect's voice grew more frantic. Tony tried to grab him, to snap him out of it, but Max threw him across the room like he weighed nothing. Jake was fumbling with his equipment, trying to get the alarms back on, but it was too late. Max was no longer Max. He was something else, something terrifying. We bolted for the door, but the woman just stood there, smiling, like she knew exactly what she had done. Lawrence could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. And the old woman, what happened to her? The suspect shook his head. I don't know. By the time the cops showed up, she was gone. Vanished. Just like Max, Tony, and Jake. I was the only one left, and they found me in the alley, babbling about the old woman in the dust. They thought I was crazy. Maybe I am. But I swear to you, detective, that's what happened. That woman, she wasn't normal. She was something else. Something evil. The room fell into a heavy silence, the weight of the suspect's words hanging in the air. Lawrence didn't know what to believe, but one thing was certain: this case was far from ordinary, and the truth, whatever it was, lay buried in shadows darker than he had ever encountered. The heist had gone catastrophically wrong, and the suspect knew they had to escape quickly. Despite Max's terrifying transformation, the suspect couldn't abandon him. With adrenaline-fueled strength, he dragged Max out while Jake and Tony provided cover. The old woman's eerie whispers lingered in his mind as they sped into the night, leaving the city lights behind and plunging into a dense forest. They found refuge in an old, abandoned cabin, its broken windows and rotting wood offering a semblance of safety. Inside, they huddled around a small fire, their faces flickering with fear and confusion. "What the hell happened back there?" Tony whispered, his voice shaking. "What did that old woman do to Max?" Jake, still trembling, said, "It had to be some kind of drug. Maybe she was protecting the store with chemicals, or maybe Max just snapped." The suspect shook his head. "It wasn't drugs. That woman was doing something to him, something we don't understand." Tony's eyes widened. "You think it was a curse or magic? That's insane." Jake tried to sound rational. "It must be scientific. Maybe a reaction to the powder. We need to figure it out." Deep down, they all sensed the truth was more sinister and terrifying than any drug. As the fire crackled and the forest whispered, they watched Max, who lay motionless, his breathing shallow and labored. By evening, as night fell, Max's condition showed no signs of improvement. His breathing grew more labored, his skin a mottled yellow and blue. His eyes occasionally flickered open, but there was no recognition, only pain and a haunted look. The suspect felt a chill as he realized that whatever was happening to Max was far from over. The cabin was eerily silent, the only sound being the occasional crackle of the dying fire. The suspect sat in a chair, his eyes heavy with exhaustion but unable to close. Suddenly, the creaking of the wooden floor broke the silence. He looked up and saw Max standing in the doorway, his skin a ghastly shade of yellow and blue, eyes bloodshot and vacant. Max didn't say a word, just stood there, swaying slightly. Sergei, thinking Max might be coming out of his delirium, approached him cautiously. "Max, are you okay?" he asked softly, reaching out a hand. Without warning, Max lunged at Sergei with a speed and strength that was inhuman. Sergei was thrown across the room, crashing into a table and collapsing in a heap. Panic erupted. Alexei, who had been sitting near the fire, grabbed a piece of burning wood and brandished it like a weapon. "Stay back," Maxie shouted, his voice wavering with fear. But Max, or whatever he had become, was beyond reasoning. He turned his lifeless gaze towards Alexei and charged. Alexei swung the burning wood, but Max swatted it aside effortlessly. He grabbed Alexei by the throat and lifted him off the ground, his grip like a vise. The suspect, heart pounding, reached for a nearby chair and smashed it over Max's back, but it barely seemed to faze him. Alexei gasped for breath, his face turning purple. The suspect fumbled for his gun, his hands shaking. "Max, stop," he shouted, but Max didn't even flinch. Finally, the suspect managed to pull the gun from its holster. With a deep breath, he aimed at Max's head and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, deafening in the confined space. Max's head jerked back, and he released Alexei, who fell to the floor, gasping for air. Max staggered, a look of momentary confusion crossing his face before he collapsed to the ground, lifeless. The room fell into a stunned silence, the only sound Alexei's labored breathing. The suspect dropped the gun, his hands still trembling. "Is everyone okay?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sergei, groaning in pain, managed to sit up. What the hell was that, he muttered, clutching his side. Alexei, still catching his breath, nodded weakly. He wasn't Max anymore, he said, his voice hoarse. He was something else, something monstrous. The suspect looked down at Max's lifeless body, a sense of dread settling in his gut. Whatever had transformed Max was beyond their understanding, something dark and malevolent. They had survived, but the terror was far from over. The forest outside seemed to close in on them, the whispering wind carrying the promise of more horrors to come. The night grew darker as the 3 remaining men gathered around Max's body. The weight of what had happened pressed heavily on them. They knew they couldn't leave Max there, they had to bury him. They found a shovel and began to dig a shallow grave just outside the cabin, the cold earth resisting their efforts. As they dug, a sense of dread filled the air. The forest seemed to watch them, its silence oppressive. Finally, they lowered Max's body into the grave. Sergei, his face grim, began to cover him with dirt. But just as the first few shovelfuls hit Max's body, a movement caught their eyes. Max's hand twitched, then his eyes snapped open, now a ghastly white. Black liquid oozed from his mouth, and his movements were jerky and uncoordinated, like a grotesque puppet. Max, or what was once Max, began to rise from the grave. The men stumbled back, horror etched on their faces. "Run!" the suspect shouted, and they bolted towards the car parked nearby. They scrambled into the vehicle, hearts pounding with fear. As they sped away, the suspect glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing Max's shambling form recede into the distance. Breathing heavily, they drove in silence, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. It wasn't until they were miles away that the suspect noticed something was wrong with Sergei. His skin had started to yellow, dark patches forming along his neck and arms. Sergei sat slumped in the back seat, unresponsive to their questions. "Sergei, are you okay?" the suspect asked, his voice filled with dread. Sergei didn't respond, his eyes unfocused and glassy. The dark patches on his skin grew more pronounced, spreading like a sinister infection. Alexei turned to look at Sergei, fear and recognition dawning in his eyes. "Oh God, it's happening to him too," he whispered. The suspect's mind raced. They had to do something, but what? The infection, whatever it was, had taken Max and now was claiming Sergei. The car filled with a tense, oppressive silence, each man lost in his own thoughts of fear and desperation. Suddenly, Sergei began to convulse, his body racked with violent shudders. The suspect swerved the car to the side of the road and stopped, turning to face Sergei. "We need to get him out of the car," he said urgently. Alexei nodded, opening the door and helping to pull Sergei out. They laid him on the ground, unsure of what to do. Sergei's breathing was ragged, his eyes rolling back in his head. The dark patches on his skin seemed to pulse, a sickly, unnatural rhythm. "We can't let him turn into what Max became," Alexei said, his voice trembling. The suspect nodded, knowing he was right, but feeling the weight of the decision crushing him. They watched helplessly as Sergei's transformation continued, a grim reminder of the horrors they had barely escaped and the unknown terror that still lay ahead. In the dim light of the car, the suspect noticed blood seeping through Sergei's sleeve. Pulling it back, he revealed a deep, festering bite wound on Sergei's arm. The edges were inflamed, black veins spreading outward. "Sergei!" "What happened?" the suspect asked, but Sergei's eyes were glazed, his breathing shallow. The suspect grabbed a first aid kit and tried to clean and bandage the wound. As he pressed a cloth to it, Sergei convulsed violently, a guttural growl escaping his lips. His skin turned yellow, and dark patches spread like ink. His movements became erratic, and his eyes rolled back. "Alexei, help me hold him down," the suspect shouted. But Sergei's transformation was swift and horrific. His strength grew, and he became increasingly aggressive. Suddenly, Sergei attacked Alexei, biting into his throat with brutal force. Blood sprayed across the windshield as Alexei's screams filled the car. The vehicle swerved wildly before crashing through trees and underbrush. Alexei's lifeless body slumped over the wheel, causing the car to slam into a tree. The impact was jarring, but the suspect, strapped in by his seatbelt, was protected by the deployed airbag. Disoriented and bleeding, he struggled to free himself. He glanced over to see Sergei, now fully transformed, restrained by his seatbelt but thrashing violently. The suspect managed to kick open the door and stumbled out of the wrecked car. The night was eerily silent, the forest seeming to hold its breath as he fled. His mind raced with the horror of what had happened. The air was heavy with the weight of his survival, and he knew he had to put as much distance as possible between himself and the nightmare. In the interrogation room, the suspect's eyes were hollow. "That's how I survived," he said quietly. "The seatbelt and airbag saved me, but I couldn't save them. Whatever happened to Max spread to Sergei. It's out there, waiting for its next victim." Badly injured from the crash, the suspect staggered through the forest, his fear of being hunted growing with each step. He spotted a faint light through the trees and pushed toward it, emerging at a small, weathered house with a warm glow coming from inside. Desperately, he knocked on the door. An elderly man, holding a shotgun, answered. "What happened to you, son?" he asked, surveying the suspect's battered state. "Please, let me in," the suspect begged. "I'm being chased by something, not human." The old man hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in, quick. Stay behind me." Inside, the suspect recounted the night's horrors: Max's transformation, Sergei's infection, and the wrecked car scene. The old man's expression grew increasingly serious as he listened. As the suspect finished his story, an eerie moan pierced the night. The old man grabbed his shotgun and peered through the window, seeing a horde of zombies, including Sergei, approaching. The old man tried to call the police, but the line went dead amid the growing chaos. "Get down," he shouted as the zombies began attacking the house. The door rattled violently, and the windows shook as the creatures pressed against them. The old man fired a shot, but the zombies were relentless. They broke through the barricades the old man and the suspect hastily set up. The suspect saw Sergei among the zombies, his grotesque appearance unmistakable. With the house overrun, the old man continued to fire his shotgun, while the suspect used a lamp to fend off the approaching zombies. The room turned into a desperate battleground, with moans and growls filling the air. The old man's struggle ended when a zombie bit him. With a final cry of agony, he fell. The suspect, now alone, fought desperately to keep the undead at bay, each moment blending into a nightmarish blur of terror and violence. Inside the house, chaos reigned as the suspect and the old man fought desperately against the zombies. The old man's shotgun roared with each shot, but the undead pressed forward with unnerving persistence. The suspect grabbed an axe from the old man's tool shed and swung it at the nearest zombie, Sergei. The axe struck Sergei's head, but the zombie barely flinched. Despite the brutal blows, Sergei continued advancing, his skin seeming almost impervious to damage. "Sergei, stop!" the suspect shouted in vain. The axe struck Sergei's shoulder, but he staggered only slightly before resuming his relentless assault. The suspect felt the futility of his attempts as Sergei's attacks grew fiercer, ignoring the injury. The old man fought valiantly but was soon overwhelmed. The zombies swarmed him, and despite his shotgun and fierce resistance, he was dragged down. His final screams were drowned by the snarls and growls of the zombies as they tore into him. With no other options, the suspect raced to the window, throwing it open and scrambling outside. He hit the ground hard, his body battered and bruised. Behind him, the house was a scene of horror. The zombies were devouring the old man, and the sirens of approaching police grew louder. The police arrived just as the zombies turned their attention to the new arrivals. Officers, unprepared for the onslaught, were immediately attacked. The undead lunged at them with ferocious strength. Screams and gunfire erupted as the officers fought desperately but were quickly overrun. The suspect, heart pounding, fled into the forest, driven by sheer survival instinct. As he ran, the night echoed with the sounds of the carnage he had left behind. The house, now a grim tableau of death, faded into the darkness, but the horrific images and the screams of the officers haunted him as he disappeared into the woods. As the suspect stumbled through the dark forest, his mind raced with the horrors he had witnessed. His breath came in ragged gasps, each snap of a twig underfoot sending a fresh wave of terror through him. The night was oppressive, the dense trees and shadows creating a feeling of being constantly watched. Every distant sound was magnified in his paranoid state. After what felt like hours of desperate running, he spotted headlights cutting through the darkness. Relief surged through him as he stumbled into the path of a police patrol. The officers, clearly alerted by the commotion earlier, quickly recognized his battered state and rushed to his aid. They guided him into their vehicle, offering him a blanket and water as they began driving away from the horrific scene. But as the suspect sat in the back of the police car, a creeping dread settled over him. The nightmarish images of the zombies and their relentless pursuit haunted him. His mind replayed the horrors he had experienced, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the curse that had befallen him and his friends was far from over. "It's not over," he murmured to himself, his voice trembling. "They'll find me. They always do." The officers, while trying to comfort him, were puzzled by his paranoia. The suspect's eyes darted nervously to the forest, where the shadows seemed to twist and turn with a sinister intent. He was convinced that the zombies had somehow followed him, that the curse was a relentless force that wouldn't let him escape. Despite the officers' reassurances, the suspect's fear only grew. He saw the trees moving like dark sentinels, the moonlight casting eerie shapes that seemed to be watching him. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig made his heart race, each sound a reminder that he was not truly safe. As the car sped along the dark roads, the suspect's paranoia reached its peak. He was convinced that the zombies were closing in, that the curse was tracking him, and that no matter how fast they drove or how far they went, the undead would inevitably catch up. The constant, gnawing fear was almost as torturous as the actual events he had survived. In the back of the police car, the suspect's mind became a battlefield of terror and hopelessness. He knew deep down that the darkness was not just outside but within. The curse seemed to have marked him, an unending shadow that would follow him until the end. He shivered under the blanket, his thoughts a tangle of fear and resignation. He had escaped the immediate danger, but the specter of what he had witnessed lingered, a constant reminder that the nightmare was far from over. Kostya was the epitome of normalcy. He lived a straightforward life, working a 9-to-5 job and keeping to a routine that many would find unremarkable. He had never been one for the supernatural, had never been fascinated by ghost stories or urban legends. His world was grounded in facts and logic, a place where the paranormal was relegated to fiction and the stuff of movies. Kostya's days were filled with the ordinary a steady job, quiet evenings, and the occasional trip to the local coffee shop. For years, Kostya had harbored a story that seemed too bizarre to share, fearing that anyone who heard it would dismiss him as delusional. He worried about appearing foolish, about being branded as someone who let imagination run wild. The thought of recounting his experience was intimidating. It felt like stepping into a realm he had always avoided, one where the boundaries between reality and fantasy blurred in unsettling ways. Despite his mundane existence, Kostya had one great passion: hiking. This love for the outdoors began in his childhood, nurtured by parents who enrolled him in a Boy Scout troop. The Scouts had introduced him to the joys of exploring nature, teaching him survival skills and fostering a deep appreciation for the wilderness. Those formative experiences had ignited a lifelong affection for trekking through forests, climbing hills, and immersing himself in the tranquility of the natural world. As he grew older, this childhood fascination evolved into a cherished hobby. Weekends found Kostya with a backpack slung over his shoulders, venturing into various trails and nature reserves. Each hike was an escape from the mundane, a chance to disconnect from the bustle of everyday life and reconnect with something pure and elemental. He relished the solitude of the trails, the crunch of leaves underfoot, and the sense of achievement upon reaching a summit. For Kostya, hiking was more than a pastime, it was a sanctuary from the pressures of modern living. The serenity of nature provided a stark contrast to his otherwise predictable life. The forests and mountains were his refuge, a place where he felt at peace and in control. His weekends were marked by these solitary journeys, each hike a testament to his enduring love for the great outdoors. Yet, despite the solace he found in nature, there was always a part of him that remained grounded in the rational. The idea of encountering something supernatural during these hikes was foreign and unsettling. It was a thought he would rather avoid, preferring to focus on the tangible joys of his hikes rather than the eerie possibilities lurking in the shadows of the forest. Kostya's life took on a vibrant hue when he met Andrei, a fellow hiking enthusiast whose passion matched and often exceeded his own. Their friendship began in the most fortuitous way, a chance encounter on a rugged trail where both had stopped to catch their breath. What started as a casual conversation about hiking gear soon blossomed into a deep and lasting bond. Andrei was not just a hiking buddy, he was a kindred spirit, someone who shared Kostia's love for adventure and the great outdoors. Together, they embarked on numerous journeys, their weekends marked by new trails and challenging climbs. They celebrated milestones such as purchasing their first car, which became their trusty steed for countless excursions into the wilderness. Their shared enthusiasm for hiking and exploration was complemented by their camaraderie, forged through late-night campfires, laughter, and the occasional misadventure. One memorable incident involved them falling through the ice, while ice fishing, a harrowing yet bonding experience that left them with a story they would retell countless times. Tragedy struck about a year ago, shattering Kostia's world and leaving a void that seemed insurmountable. Andrei and his girlfriend Alyona were killed in a car accident. The news hit Kostia and their circle of friends like a thunderbolt, a devastating blow that left everyone grappling with the loss. Andrei's death was a crushing blow, a cruel twist of fate that extinguished a bright light in their lives. The accident occurred on a snowy evening, the details of which were pieced together from shattered fragments of memory and reports. Andrei and Alyona were on their way back from a weekend getaway, their car skidding on an icy stretch of road and colliding with another vehicle. Both were pronounced dead at the scene, their lives tragically cut short. For Kostia, the loss was more than just the death of a friend. It was the end of a chapter filled with shared dreams and adventures. The news reverberated through his life, altering his perspective and altering his weekends. The trails they once trekked together were now shadowed by his absence. Every hike seemed to carry a ghostly echo of Andrei's laughter, every trail a reminder of the moments they would never share again. The impact of Andrei's death rippled through their circle of friends, leaving them grappling with grief and a sense of loss that was both profound and disorienting. Their once vibrant adventures were now tinged with a somber reflection on the fragility of life. Kostia found himself haunted by memories of his friend, their shared experiences now bittersweet reminders of a time when life was full of possibility and joy. In the wake of the tragedy, Kostia's passion for hiking remained, but it was no longer the same. The solace he once found in nature was now mixed with a profound sense of melancholy. The trails, once a sanctuary, were now tinged with the pain of loss. Andrei's absence left a scar on Kostia's heart, a reminder of a friendship that had shaped his life in profound ways. In the months following Andrei's death, the hiking club that had once been a hub of activity and camaraderie gradually fell into disarray. The once regular hikes and weekend adventures dwindled into infrequent gatherings. The WhatsApp group, once bustling with plans, jokes, and photos, became eerily silent. Conversations became rare, and the group chat was reduced to sporadic messages, often left unanswered. Eventually, only Kostia remained active in the group, now a ghostly relic of happier times, while Andrei's name lingered as a poignant reminder of what had been lost. One chilly night, Kostia was jolted awake by a ping from his phone. He groggily reached for it, only to find a message in the hiking group chat from Andrei's account, "Go outside." Kostia rubbed his eyes, thinking it was a bizarre dream. The message was from Andrei's old number, but the timestamp was unmistakable. Disbelief gave way to unease, but he tried to ignore it, convinced it was a glitch or prank. Later, as dawn approached, his phone buzzed again with a new message from the same thread, "I'm outside." Panic set in. Kostia's heart raced as he stared at the screen, the chilling message seeming impossible. Gathering his courage, he slipped outside, the fog swallowing up the streetlights. The night was eerily silent, and as he looked around, the unsettling reality that Andrei or someone using his account might be lurking in the darkness filled him with dread. As Kostia stood outside in the fog-shrouded darkness, his phone buzzed again with a new message. His blood ran cold as he saw Andrei's name on the screen. The profile picture, a familiar image of Andrei smiling, stared back at him. Andrei was supposed to be dead. This was impossible. With trembling hands, Kostia checked his phone again, only to find that the message had already vanished. The unsettling reality of the situation began to sink in. Desperate to find answers, Kostya scanned his yard and the surrounding area, but the fog and shadows offered no clues. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The empty street was silent, save for the distant hum of the city, but the tension in the air was palpable. His mind raced, trying to rationalize the situation, but the eerie sense of being watched wouldn't dissipate. Back inside, Kostya's phone buzzed with a new message from Andrei's account. "Kostya, I see you." Don't hide fear gripped him as he read the chilling message, the familiar profile picture of his deceased friend glaring back at him. Desperate, Kostya typed a reply. "Andrei? Is this you?" But before he could send it, another message appeared. "It wants to take my legs." The words were unsettling, filled with an eerie sense of dread. More messages followed, each more disturbing than the last. "Kostya, it's in the house," one read, and another said, "I can't escape." The cryptic and frightening phrases painted a nightmarish picture of Andrei's final moments, as if a dark force was tormenting him from beyond. Kostya felt a cold sweat form as he struggled to understand what was happening. The messages suggested a malevolent presence, and he was left grappling with the terrifying possibility that Andrei's spirit, or something pretending to be him, was reaching out for help in the most horrifying way. The night was suffused with an oppressive silence when Kostya's phone buzzed again. Groggy and anxious, he glanced at the screen, only to see another message from Andrei's account. This time his heart sank further as he noticed the ominous ellipses -- indicating that someone was typing a response. The sight of those three little dots, endlessly blinking, created a paralyzing sense of dread. They seemed to mock him with their slow, deliberate pace, as if to stretch out his fear. Kostya's mind raced. The ellipses continued to blink as if taunting him, their rhythm punctuating the stillness of the night. He felt a cold sweat break out, his breath coming in shallow, rapid bursts. Each second that the dots appeared felt like an eternity. The knowledge that someone or something was actively engaged in this horrifying communication was nearly unbearable. The line between reality and nightmare seemed to blur further with each passing moment. Overwhelmed by panic, Kostya's hands trembled as he dialed 911. His voice was shaky as he reported a possible break-in, fabricating a story that someone was trying to force their way into his apartment. The fear of the unknown was driving him to extremes, and he needed reassurance that he wasn't alone. Within minutes, a patrol car arrived, its flashing lights cutting through the darkness of the quiet street. The officers, professional and calm, began their search of the premises. Kostya watched as they methodically checked each room, their presence providing a small measure of comfort amid his growing terror. Despite their thorough inspection, the officers found nothing out of the ordinary. No signs of forced entry, no suspicious activity, just the cold, silent emptiness of his apartment. The officers reassured Kostya that there was no immediate danger, and although their presence slightly eased his anxiety, the terror remained. As they left, Kostya was left alone once more, with only the dim glow of his phone screen and the lingering sense of dread that the messages might resume. The brief respite provided by the police did little to diminish his fear. Instead, it left him haunted by the unsettling certainty that something dark and malevolent was still lurking just beyond the edge of his understanding. Desperate to regain some semblance of control, Kostya tried to rationalize the situation. His mind clung to the possibility that someone had gotten hold of Andrei's phone and was playing a cruel prank. The idea that an unknown individual could be using Andrei's account to torment him seemed almost plausible. He composed a message, his fingers moving with urgency as he typed out a threat. "If this continues, I will call the police again. Stop messing with me." With a deep breath, Kostya sent the message, hoping it would deter the prankster. He tried to convince himself that the unnerving messages were just the work of a misguided troublemaker. He paced around his apartment, attempting to focus on rational thoughts and distract himself from the creeping fear that had taken hold. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more sinister at play. Despite his efforts to end the disturbing communication, the messages kept coming. Kostya's phone buzzed intermittently throughout the night, each new message fueling his growing anxiety. He glanced at the screen, his pulse quickening as he saw a new notification from Andrei's account. This time, the message contained a series of photos. Kostya opened them, only to find a series of blurry, indistinct images. They were taken in a forest, the scenery appearing distorted and chaotic. The photos showed patches of trees, tangled underbrush, and dark, shadowy shapes that seemed to shift and merge. None of the images made clear sense, but each one evoked an eerie feeling, as though they were glimpses into some dark and incomprehensible reality. The grainy photos were unsettling, each image more perplexing than the last. It was as if someone or something was trying to convey a message through fragmented and obscure visuals. Kostya's mind raced with fear and confusion, trying to decipher what the images meant. The forest in the photos seemed almost alive, casting a menacing shadow over the familiar trails he once walked with Andrei. As he stared at the photos, the once comforting idea of a prankster seemed increasingly unlikely. The images had an unsettling quality that suggested a deeper, more disturbing truth. Kostya's dread intensified as he realized that the situation was slipping further out of his grasp, leaving him with more questions than answers. The fear of what lay hidden in the blurred depths of those photos was only amplified by the knowledge that Andrei's account was being used to reach out to him in such a chilling way. Kostya's mind raced as he grappled with the bizarre situation. He was unable to find any logical explanation for the disturbing messages and eerie photos he was receiving. The idea that someone could orchestrate such a cruel prank seemed increasingly implausible. Each new message from Andrei's account deepened his confusion and heightened his paranoia. The absence of a clear motive or identifiable sender left Kostya feeling as though he were caught in a nightmarish loop where rational thought was slipping through his fingers. His attempts to piece together the situation only amplified his fear. Kostya questioned every possibility. Was someone trying to drive him mad? Was it a supernatural occurrence beyond his understanding? The uncertainty gnawed at him, filling him with an escalating sense of dread. The lack of answers and the persistent, haunting messages made him feel as if he was descending into madness, unable to escape the chilling grip of an inexplicable terror. The photos Kostya received were equally unsettling. Each image, taken in the forest, was a chaotic jumble of indistinct shapes and shadows. The photos displayed various sections of the woods, patches of dense vegetation, gnarled tree trunks, and an overwhelming darkness that seemed to consume the frame. The images were blurry and erratic, each one more disorienting than the last. There was no discernible pattern or structure to the photos. They were taken haphazardly, their chaotic nature adding to the eerie atmosphere. Kostya tried to make sense of the snapshots, but their lack of clarity only deepened his anxiety. The dark forest scenes seemed almost alive, as though they were hiding something malevolent just beyond the edge of the lens. The more he scrutinized the photos, the more he felt like he was staring into a void that defied comprehension. The images offered no information, no clues, just a sinister glimpse into a place he couldn't understand. The forest, once a familiar backdrop to his outdoor adventures, had transformed into a haunting labyrinth of shadows and fear. Kostya's growing paranoia and the haunting nature of the photos left him feeling as though he was trapped in a disturbing puzzle, with no clear path to escape from the encroaching darkness. The notifications on Kostya's phone came in a relentless stream, each one bringing a new, unsettling image. The photos were taken in the dead of night, capturing various scenes from the forest. Many of the pictures were blurred, their details obscured by the darkness. Flashlight beams cut through the gloom sporadically, creating harsh, unnatural contrasts. Some images showed vague, distorted shapes that hinted at the presence of figures in the shadows, but nothing was clear enough to make out. Each new photo only added to Kostya's growing sense of dread. The forest in these images was twisted and otherworldly, its familiar trees and underbrush taking on menacing forms under the harsh glare of the flash. The shapes in the photos seemed to move, their edges wavering as if they were alive and shifting just beyond the reach of the camera. It was as though the forest itself had become an alien landscape, a place where reality warped and distorted. Among the torrent of unsettling photos, one stood out as particularly disturbing. It was a failed attempt at a selfie, capturing only a fragment of a face. The image was grotesque, a close-up shot of a forehead and eyes wide open in what seemed to be a blend of terror and madness. The face was smeared and stretched, like a grotesque distortion of reality. The eyes were unnaturally wide, their whites glaring out of the photo with a chilling intensity. The entire face looked like a horrifying smear of light and shadow, with features blurred and melted together. It resembled an abstract, nightmarish caricature more than a human visage. The eyes, though, were the most haunting part, glaring directly at the camera with an expression that was both desperate and unearthly. The image was almost unrecognizable, a twisted mockery of what a human face should look like. Kostya stared at the selfie, unable to tear his eyes away from the ghastly image. The face seemed to reach out from the darkness, its distorted expression frozen in a moment of terror that mirrored Kostya's own fear. The photo was a chilling reminder of how far beyond normalcy his situation had spiraled, leaving him paralyzed by the grotesque vision of what or who was lurking in the shadows of the forest. Desperate for a solution, Kostya reached out to his remaining friends from the hiking group. He described the unnerving messages and eerie photos he had received, hoping they might offer some rational explanation or guidance. His friends listened with a mix of skepticism and concern, but ultimately they leaned towards a more mundane explanation. They suggested that it might be an elaborate prank or a hoax intended to scare him. Their advice was straightforward: delete the group, block the number, and move on. It was a practical solution designed to cut off the source of his anxiety. Kostya followed their advice, removing himself from the group chat and blocking Andrei's account. But despite his efforts to distance himself, the unease lingered. He hoped that by severing the digital connection, the strange occurrences would cease, but the haunting images and chilling messages had already left a deep mark on his psyche. Even after blocking the number and removing himself from the group, Kostya continued to receive messages from Andrei's account. The responses were nonsensical and cryptic, adding to his growing sense of dread. Whenever Kostya asked about the sender's whereabouts or sought guidance on how to stop the nightmare, the replies were baffling and disjointed. One message read, "The darkness stretches its fingers across the cracked sky." Another said, "I see the broken world through shattered eyes." The phrases were filled with ominous imagery and abstract references that made no coherent sense. Each message seemed to describe a surreal and nightmarish landscape that was far removed from anything Kostya could understand or relate to. The incoherent replies only deepened Kostya's fear. They painted a picture of a reality that defied explanation, a dark, fractured world that seemed to bleed into his own. The unsettling nature of the messages, combined with their illogical content, left him feeling increasingly isolated and terrified. The line between reality and madness was blurring, and Kostya was left struggling to make sense of the dark, enigmatic messages that continued to haunt him. In a desperate attempt to make sense of the situation, Kostya began calling the number associated with the unsettling messages. He hoped that speaking directly to someone might bring clarity or at least provide an end to the torment. However, every call went unanswered. The phone rang endlessly, filling the silence with a persistent, monotonous tone. Nights were the worst. As he called after dark, the ringing seemed to stretch into an oppressive silence. Each unanswered call only deepened Kostya's sense of isolation and frustration, amplifying his growing fear that something was profoundly wrong. The constant rejection from the other end of the line felt like a void, making him feel more helpless with each passing moment. The situation took a darker turn when Kostya received several unsettling videos. One video, in particular, was deeply disturbing. It showed a shaky, handheld shot of a dark forest clearing at night. The camera wavered erratically, capturing fleeting images of tall grass and shadowy figures. As the video continued, the focus blurred, and Kostya could hear Andrei's ragged breathing, filled with fear. The camera occasionally caught a vague, menacing shape on the edge of the clearing. The figure was barely visible, shifting and blending into the darkness. Andrei's terrified voice came through the video, pleading for help as he frantically moved the camera. The shape at the clearing's edge seemed to move unnaturally, adding to the sense of dread. The video abruptly ended, leaving Kostya with a chilling sense of unease. The combination of Andrei's palpable fear and the shadowy figure painted a nightmarish reality, pulling Kostya further into a disturbing and incomprehensible horror. The relentless barrage of messages, photos, and videos began to take a severe toll on Kostya's mental state. Despite his logical understanding that this could be an elaborate prank, the fear gnawing at him was very real. The continuous influx of disturbing content made it increasingly difficult to distinguish reality from delusion. The persistent dread that if Andrei were somehow still alive, he might be in dire need of help haunted Kostya day and night. This anxiety created a disorienting tension, blending fear with a nagging sense of responsibility. Kostya found himself caught between rational skepticism and an overwhelming urge to act, driven by a deep-seated concern for his friend's well-being. One video in particular was the most unsettling. It showed Andrei's trembling hands as he filmed a dark, moonlit clearing in the forest. The camera wobbled, revealing a stark, eerie landscape illuminated by occasional flashes of light. As the video progressed, a chilling figure emerged from the darkness, a tall, gaunt man who moved with an unnatural, unsettling gait. The figure was walking backward, his back facing the camera, and came to a halt after each step, as if frozen in place before moving again. The sight of the man's jerky, disjointed movements created an aura of profound discomfort. His eerie, mechanical motions made him appear almost like a marionette controlled by invisible strings. The figure's approach was slow and deliberate, each step increasing the tension. The sense of dread built with every advancing step, as the figure drew closer to Andrei. Just as the figure reached Andrei, the video abruptly cut off, leaving the screen black. The abrupt end to the footage was jarring, leaving Kostya with a deep sense of foreboding. The combination of the unnatural movement and the sudden silence created an unsettling gap, filling Kostya with a chilling uncertainty about what had happened in those final moments. The video's eerie quality and the figure's menacing presence lingered in Kostya's mind, fueling his growing fear and paranoia. The second video Kostya received was both mesmerizing and unsettling. It began with a clear shot of a stone basin filled with water, positioned next to a crackling campfire that cast flickering shadows around the scene. The basin's surface reflected the night sky above, the water mirroring a field of twinkling stars. But as the video played, the serene beauty of the starlit reflection began to shift in a disturbing manner. The stars on the water's surface started to move, their patterns swirling and twisting as if they were being drawn into an unseen force. The once peaceful reflection turned into a swirling vortex of light, the stars spiraling in a mesmerizing but disorienting dance. The glow from the vortex grew brighter, casting an eerie, otherworldly light that danced across the edges of the stone basin. The effect was both hypnotic and terrifying, as if the fabric of reality was being twisted and warped before Kostya's eyes. The swirling lights created an unsettling sense of movement and energy, leaving Kostya with an inexplicable feeling of dread. The third video was perhaps the most disturbing. It showed a crudely made doll standing upright. The doll's face was grotesque, its features exaggerated into a nightmarish mask of exaggerated horror, with wide, hollow eyes and a gaping mouth that seemed permanently fixed in a scream. The doll's overall appearance was unsettling, resembling a twisted caricature of a child's toy. In the video, Andrei's hand reached into the frame, pressing down on the doll's chest. The doll emitted a piercing, shrill squeak with each press, the sound sharp and jarring. Andrei repeated the action several times, the doll's squeaks echoing in the otherwise quiet setting. Each time he pressed, he muttered the name Alina under his breath, his voice trembling with a mix of desperation and fear. The repetition of the name, combined with the doll's distressing appearance and the screeching sound, created a sense of mounting horror. The video left Kostya with a deep sense of unease. The combination of the grotesque doll and Andrei's frantic, almost ritualistic behavior suggested a disturbing connection to something far more sinister. The name Alina seemed to hold a dark significance, hinting at a past trauma or a haunting presence that was now woven into the fabric of the terror that was unfolding. The unsettling imagery and Andrei's frantic actions left Kostya with a chilling sense of dread, amplifying the fear that had begun to consume him. Kostya's psychological state began to deteriorate as Andrei continued to send disturbing videos and cryptic messages. Each new piece of content added to a mounting sense of anxiety and fear, drawing him deeper into a spiral of distress. The videos, with their unsettling imagery and cryptic symbolism, seemed to mock his attempts to rationalize the situation. He found himself repeatedly watching the same videos, obsessively trying to extract some coherent meaning from their disjointed and eerie sequences. However, each viewing left him more perplexed and frightened than before, as if the images were intentionally designed to defy understanding. The emotional toll was significant. Kostia's attempts to decipher the videos became a daily obsession, consuming hours as he scrutinized every frame and analyzed every detail. The relentless barrage of content kept him on edge, constantly revisiting the videos in a desperate attempt to find clarity. The lack of a clear explanation, combined with the eerie nature of the material, only served to heighten his anxiety. The messages and videos seemed to taunt him with their inscrutability, amplifying his sense of helplessness and fear. Despite the overwhelming evidence of a potential prank, Kostia began to seriously question whether this was indeed the work of a mischievous individual. The bizarre quality and disturbing content of the videos suggested something far more sinister than a simple hoax. The video's high production value and the disturbing, cryptic messages did not fit the typical profile of a prank. They seemed too elaborate, too unsettling, to be dismissed as mere jokes. Kostia's doubts grew as he considered the effort and resources that would be required to create such disturbing content. The videos appeared meticulously crafted, with a level of detail that suggested a deliberate intent to unsettle and frighten. The raw, emotional content and the disturbing imagery seemed to transcend the boundaries of ordinary pranks. Kostia found himself grappling with the possibility that there was a deeper, darker truth behind the videos, a reality that was more terrifying than he had initially considered. The fear of confronting something genuinely malevolent began to overshadow his initial skepticism, leaving him increasingly unsettled and vulnerable. In a desperate bid to make sense of the unsettling events, Kostia turned to various sources for help. He sought out psychics and occult practitioners, hoping that their purported abilities could provide answers or solutions to the eerie disturbances. However, his efforts proved fruitless. Many of these self-proclaimed experts dismissed his concerns as a hoax, unwilling to believe the authenticity of his claims. Those who did engage with him offered vague and unhelpful advice, suggesting rituals and remedies that felt more like superstition than genuine solutions. Kostia's attempts to address the issue through these unconventional means only heightened his frustration. The psychics and occultists either gave contradictory advice or suggested actions that did nothing to alleviate his fear. Their responses were often generic and lacked practical relevance, leaving Kostia feeling even more isolated and desperate. The promises of mystical interventions and supernatural remedies fell short, intensifying his sense of helplessness as he faced the continued onslaught of disturbing content alone. Eventually, the eerie messages and videos from Andrei ceased abruptly. The once constant stream of disturbing content came to a sudden halt, leaving Kostia in a state of mixed emotions. Andrei's phone became unreachable, and the silence that followed was both a relief and a source of lingering unease. The abrupt end to the communication provided Kostia with a semblance of peace, a respite from the relentless psychological pressure he had endured. Despite the relief, Kostia could not shake the lingering bitterness and sadness that accompanied the sudden disappearance. The abrupt cessation of contact with Andrei left him with unresolved questions and a haunting sense of what might have happened. The relief of no longer receiving the terrifying messages was overshadowed by the painful reality that he might never fully understand the nature of the distressing experience. The end of the communications marked a tragic conclusion to a chapter filled with fear and uncertainty, leaving Kostia to grapple with the emotional aftermath and the unsettling questions that remained unanswered. In the wake of the chilling events, Kostia made a decisive choice to remove himself from the group and erase all related files. The experience had left him deeply unsettled, and he realized that many aspects of the situation did not fit even within the realm of the paranormal. The disturbing messages and eerie videos had been consuming his life, and the nagging inconsistencies began to weigh heavily on him. By deleting the group and clearing his digital footprint, Kostia hoped to sever the connection to the terrifying episodes and reclaim some semblance of normalcy. The act of deletion was both a physical and psychological gesture, aimed at distancing himself from the nightmarish experiences that had overtaken his life. As Kostia reflected on the events, he began to grapple with several unresolved questions that added to his growing unease. One disturbing detail stood out. Andrei had known Kostia's address and floor, a piece of personal information that should have been impossible to acquire if this were merely a prank. The knowledge of his specific location added an unnerving layer of realism to the situation, suggesting a level of intrusion that was deeply unsettling. Additionally, Kostya noticed an odd detail in the video's ghostly entities, if they were indeed supernatural, should not produce the sounds of breathing. Yet, throughout the footage, the sound of heavy, uneven breaths was distinctly audible. This inconsistency puzzled Kostya and contradicted his understanding of ghostly behavior. The eerie sound of breath, coupled with the strange questions Andrei had asked in his messages, left Kostya with a lingering sense of dread and confusion. These anomalies undermined the idea of a purely paranormal explanation, intensifying the mystery and fear that surrounded the entire ordeal. The unsettling saga took an unexpected turn when a friend of Kostya's sent him a news report detailing a strange discovery. The report revealed that a man had been found living in the forest, and it was linked to the mysterious messages Kostya had been receiving. The revelation was shocking. The man, whose identity was still unknown, had been using Andrei's phone to send the cryptic and frightening communications. The police investigation uncovered a secluded hideout deep in the forest. Inside, they found a chilling array of personal belongings that belonged to Andrei: his phone, backpack, and various other personal items. The hideout was primitive and crude, clearly an attempt to live off the grid, but it was evident that the man had been living there for some time. Among the possessions was the phone that had been used to send the disturbing messages to Kostya. It was discovered with the battery almost drained, explaining why the messages had abruptly stopped. The man was eventually found in a disoriented state and taken into custody. His reasons for targeting Kostya remained unclear, but his actions had led to a series of events that left Kostya grappling with the unsettling reality of the situation. The discovery of Andrei's belongings and the phone in the man's possession confirmed that the source of the terror was not supernatural, but rather a deeply troubled individual. The eerie connection to Kostya's life, coupled with the use of Andrei's personal items, added a new layer of complexity to the already chilling experience. The news report brought a grim sense of closure to the mystery, but it also left Kostya with a lingering unease. The realization that someone had been deliberately tormenting him using Andrei's belongings created a new kind of horror, one rooted in human malice rather than the supernatural. The forest, once a place of escape and tranquility, had become a setting for an unsettling chapter in Kostya's life, forever marking his experience with a deep sense of dread and disbelief. The forest dweller, who had caused such a disturbance in Kostya's life, did not commit any overtly horrific crimes, so the police handled the situation with a degree of indifference. His actions, though unsettling, did not fit the profile of a major criminal threat. As a result, the authorities quickly moved on from the case, leaving the man to be quietly integrated into the local lore rather than facing significant legal consequences. The lack of severe criminal charges meant that the man remained somewhat of an enigma, a curiosity, rather than a serious concern. The man, now known by the locals as Goma, became a peculiar figure of fascination. His hideout, which had once been the center of Kostya's nightmares, became a local attraction. Driven by a mix of morbid curiosity and a desire for a unique story, people began visiting the area to catch a glimpse of the strange dwelling that had once been at the heart of Kostya's terror. Kostya himself, compelled by a need for closure and driven by the strange allure of the story, ventured into the forest to find Goma's old hideout. The location was eerily familiar. Among the overgrown foliage and twisted branches, he discovered the crude underground dwelling. Inside, remnants of Goma's makeshift life were scattered rusted cans, tattered clothing, and a faint, unsettling odor of decay. The most disturbing discovery, however, was a stone structure that bore an uncanny resemblance to the stone bowl from the videos Kostya had received. It was a large, hollowed-out stone basin, weathered and empty, devoid of water and stars. The structure stood as a grim monument to the bizarre events that had unfolded, its purpose and symbolism remaining shrouded in mystery. The stone basin, sitting motionless under the dense canopy, seemed to silently witness the strange chapter that had come to an end. Its presence was a chilling reminder of the terror Kostya had endured, now rendered harmless yet still profoundly disturbing. Kostya remained haunted by unresolved questions about the forest dweller's actions and the meaning behind the strange videos he had received. Why did Goma target him specifically? What was the significance of the disturbing and cryptic footage that had been sent to him? The questions gnawed at him, as the answers seemed as elusive as the mysterious figure himself. The perplexity of why only he was chosen, coupled with the unsettling content of the videos, left Kostya in a state of ongoing confusion and fear. The videos, with their surreal and unsettling imagery, had provided more questions than answers. The moving stars, the eerie stone basin, and the grotesque doll, each element seemed to hint at a deeper, darker meaning that Kostya could not decipher. Was there a hidden message or a ritualistic significance behind the strange footage? The unanswered questions fueled Kostya's unease and curiosity, leaving him with an enduring sense of dread about the nature of the forest dwellers' intentions and the true nature of the videos. As the story of Goma spread, it quickly morphed into a rich tapestry of urban legends and rumors. The enigmatic figure, once a mere nuisance, became a central character in a myriad of local myths. Some claimed that Goma was part of a secretive cult operating in the depths of the forest, engaging in forbidden rituals and dark ceremonies. Others whispered about mystical phenomena and supernatural occurrences linked to the forest, suggesting that Goma's hideout was a site of arcane power. Local gossip painted Goma as a shadowy figure who had tapped into ancient, forbidden knowledge, with his actions serving as a warning to those who dared to probe the forest's secrets. Stories circulated about eerie lights and ghostly figures seen in the woods, with Goma being blamed for these supernatural disturbances. The once ordinary forest had transformed into a place of legend and fear, with Goma's story fueling a new wave of ghost stories and dark folklore among the locals. The blend of mystery, fear, and intrigue kept the legend of Goma alive, ensuring that his tale would continue to haunt the area for years to come. The narrator begins by acknowledging that the story might seem unbelievable, especially to skeptics, but he feels a strong need to share his experience. He understands that many people are quick to dismiss anything that doesn't fit into their neatly defined version of reality. Nonetheless, he feels compelled to recount his tale. There are some experiences so profound, so unsettling, that they demand to be told, even if doing so risks ridicule or disbelief. This story, strange and haunting as it is, has weighed heavily on his mind, and he hopes that sharing it might offer some understanding or perhaps a warning to others. After completing his military service, a young man returns to his provincial hometown, hoping to reintegrate into civilian life. He had anticipated that adjusting would be challenging, but the reality was far grimmer than he expected. The town, once vibrant and bustling, now bore the scars of economic decline. Many of the factories that had provided employment to generations were now abandoned, their windows boarded up and yards overgrown with weeds. The sense of community had dissipated, replaced by an air of despair and hopelessness. He applied for countless jobs, each rejection chipping away at his confidence. Despite his military training and discipline, he found that these attributes held little value in a place where opportunities were scarce. He attended job fairs that were more like funeral processions for the local economy and sat through interviews where the interviewer's sympathy was more patronizing than helpful. His savings dwindled and the pressure to find work mounted, causing sleepless nights and frayed nerves. The future seemed bleak, and every door he knocked on seemed to close in his face, leaving him with a growing sense of desperation. Through his father's connections, he manages to get a position as a night security guard at a large shopping center. He is thrilled about this opportunity, despite the less than ideal hours. The job offers stability and a much-needed income. However, his excitement soon turns into a chilling experience. Working the night shift, he begins to notice strange occurrences. Objects seem to move on their own, and odd noises echo through the empty halls. At first, he brushes it off, attributing it to the quiet and his imagination. But as the nights go by, the disturbances grow more pronounced. Doors that were locked are found open, shadows flicker in the corners of his vision, and whispers seem to emanate from the very walls. One particularly eerie night, he decides to investigate the source of the whispers. Following the faint, disembodied voices, he ventures into a rarely used section of the shopping center. The temperature drops noticeably as he approaches, and a sense of foreboding grips him. There, huddled in the shadows, he sees them pale faces with vacant eyes and spectral forms that flicker in and out of existence. They speak to him in hushed tones, their voices a chilling chorus of forgotten souls trapped between worlds. Frozen in fear, he listens to their cryptic messages, a mix of warnings and pleas. The whispers haunt his dreams, their words etched into his consciousness like a scar. The night holds secrets that defy explanation, waiting for those brave or foolish enough to seek them out. By the second week on the job, he had already adjusted to the rhythm of the night shifts. The initial disorientation of staying awake through the quiet hours gradually faded, replaced by a certain appreciation for the tranquility that night brought to the vast, empty shopping center. The stillness, once eerie, became a backdrop for his nightly routines. He walked the silent halls with a newfound familiarity, his footsteps echoing softly against the tiled floors. Each night felt like stepping into a different world, where the usual bustle of shoppers and chatter of voices were replaced by a profound silence that was both calming and slightly unnerving. The routine checks, a necessary part of the job, were simple enough. He would methodically go from one end of the center to the other, ensuring that everything was in order. These inspections became almost meditative, a way to pass the time and keep his mind occupied. The knowledge that a supervisor would drop by only once a week before midnight added a sense of responsibility, but also a sense of freedom. He felt a certain pride in maintaining the security and order of the place, even if it was just for himself and his unseen supervisors. His partner, Yura, added a different dynamic to the otherwise solitary shifts. Yura was a jovial character, always ready with a joke or a lighthearted comment to break the monotony of the long nights. Despite the serious nature of their job, Yura had a knack for finding humor in the smallest things, and his presence was a welcome relief. He would often pull harmless pranks, like hiding behind mannequins to jump out and startle him, or leaving fake ghost sightings notes around. At first, these pranks were startling, but soon they became a part of the nightly routine, adding a touch of levity to their work. When they weren't on patrol, the two would spend their time playing games or watching movies on a small portable DVD player that Yura had brought. They would huddle in the security office, the flickering screen casting long shadows on the walls. The movies ranged from comedies to horror films, the latter often adding an extra layer of eeriness to their shifts. The camaraderie they shared made the hours fly by, and for a while it seemed like the job was not just bearable, but enjoyable. Yet, amidst the laughter and camaraderie, there was an undercurrent of something unsettling. The shopping center, despite its modern facade, felt ancient and haunted at night. The shadows seemed to move on their own, and the whispers, once thought to be figments of his imagination, began to feel more real. Yura, too, had noticed strange things but would laugh them off, calling it night shift madness, however. As the nights went on, the playful pranks and games could not fully dispel the growing sense of unease that clung to the corners of their minds. During one of their night shifts, an unexpected inspection caught them off guard. They had been accustomed to the routine checks that occurred infrequently and before midnight, so the arrival of supervisors in the dead of night was unsettling. Despite their initial surprise, they remained composed and ensured all protocols were strictly followed. Their diligence paid off. They received no reprimands and were commended for their adherence to security procedures. After the midnight inspection, the partners, wary of another surprise visit, decided to stay put in their respective positions for a while. The tension from the inspection lingered, and the usual banter between them was replaced by a cautious silence. They exchanged knowing glances, each feeling the weight of the night settling around them. Yura suggested they wait it out, perhaps play a game or watch a movie later when the coast was clear. It was a strategy born out of both caution and a desire to maintain their peace of mind. As they sat in the dimly lit security office, the minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The air seemed thicker, charged with an unspoken anticipation. Shadows danced on the walls, casting eerie shapes that seemed to twist and elongate with each passing moment. The usual sounds of the night, the hum of electronics, the distant rumble of traffic seemed muted, drowned out by the palpable sense of unease that had settled over them. Yura tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but it fell flat against the backdrop of their shared apprehension. They both knew that the night held secrets, and that the darkness concealed more than just empty storefronts and deserted corridors. The shopping center, a beacon of consumerism by day, took on a different persona at night, an ancient, brooding presence that seemed to awaken when the last customer left and the doors were locked. As the hours dragged on, their nerves began to fray. Every creak of the building, every flicker of a light bulb, sent a jolt of adrenaline through their bodies. The plan to wait it out felt like a gamble now, the stakes unknown but looming ominously in the back of their minds. Yura checked his watch repeatedly, each glance confirming that time was passing slower than usual. Eventually, they heard a faint noise from the far end of the corridor, a soft, shuffling sound that echoed eerily in the stillness. They exchanged a glance, eyes wide with shared dread. Could it be the supervisors returning for a second check? Or was it something else, something less easily explained? Their resolve wavered, but they remained rooted to their seats, unsure whether to investigate or retreat deeper into the safety of the office. The night stretched on, fraught with tension and unanswered questions. They knew that once the clock struck a certain hour, they would emerge from their sanctuary and face whatever awaited them in the darkened labyrinth of the shopping center. After the unexpected inspection, he and Yura huddled in the security office, speaking softly over the crackling radio about their plans for the remainder of the shift. They discussed the cautious approach they would take, mindful of the recent scrutiny they had faced. Yura emphasized the importance of staying vigilant and adhering to protocol, his voice tinged with a hint of unease that mirrored the narrator's own thoughts. They agreed to initially remain in their respective posts to avoid drawing attention, and then later, perhaps indulge in a late-night meal together or engage in a game to lighten the mood. As he begins his tale of the unsettling incident, the narrator is keenly aware of the skepticism his listeners might harbor. He understands that recounting events that defy conventional explanation often invites disbelief and scrutiny. The setting was innocuous enough, a bustling shopping center during the day, but it transformed under the veil of night into a realm where reality seemed to blur with the supernatural. The incident itself was subtle at first, easily dismissed as a trick of the mind or a play of shadows in the dimly lit corridors. Yet, as he delves deeper into the narrative, the details emerge with clarity and conviction. He describes the whispers that echoed through the empty halls, their words haunting and insistent, as if pleading to be heard and understood. The faces he saw, pale and ethereal, their expressions a mix of sorrow and longing, left an indelible mark on his psyche. He anticipates the raised eyebrows, the skeptical glances exchanged among his audience as he recounts the inexplicable encounters that unfolded during those solitary night shifts. Their disbelief is expected, perhaps even warranted in the light of day, where rationality reigns supreme and the paranormal is relegated to the realm of fiction. Yet for him the experience was all too real, a testament to the unseen forces that lurk beyond the veil of our understanding. He speaks not to convince, but to share a truth that defies easy explanation, a truth that continues to haunt him, whispering its eerie secrets in the stillness of the night. Whether believed or dismissed, his story stands as a testament to the unsettling mysteries that dwell in the shadows, waiting for those brave enough to confront them. Returning from military service, he faced a daunting challenge in reintegrating into civilian life. The skills he had acquired during his time in the Army, discipline, teamwork, and a strong work ethic seemed to count for little in the job market of his provincial hometown. The local economy was in decline, with many factories shuttered and employment opportunities scarce. Despite his qualifications and determination, he found himself met with rejection after rejection. The transition from military to civilian life was not just about finding a job, it was about adjusting to a different pace, a different set of expectations. The structured environment of the Army gave way to the unpredictability of job hunting, where each day brought new uncertainties and disappointments. The experience left him feeling adrift, unsure of where he belonged or how to move forward. Over time, however, he learned to leverage his military background as a strength rather than a hindrance. The resilience forged through rigorous training helped him persevere through the toughest moments of uncertainty. It taught him resourcefulness and adaptability, qualities that would prove invaluable in navigating the challenges ahead. Amidst the bleak landscape of job rejections, his father's support emerged as a beacon of hope. Through his father's connections, he secured a position as a night security guard at a bustling shopping center in the heart of the city. The opportunity brought a mix of relief and gratitude, knowing that his father's belief in him had opened a door when so many others had closed. His first night on the job was both daunting and exhilarating. The vast expanse of the shopping center, usually teeming with shoppers during the day, now lay eerily quiet under the cover of darkness. As he patrolled the empty corridors and monitored the surveillance screens, a sense of responsibility settled over him. He took pride in his role as a protector of the center's assets and the safety of its patrons, even if his duties required working through the night. The adjustment to the nocturnal rhythm of the security guard was challenging, yet he found a strange comfort in the solitude and the sense of purpose it provided. The nights were punctuated by occasional disturbances, a flicker of movement caught on camera, a door that seemed to open on its own, but he approached each incident with vigilance and a steady resolve. In the quiet moments between patrols, he reflected on how far he had come since leaving the army. The job offered stability and a steady income, allowing him to regain his footing and start planning for the future. Though the shadows held their secrets and the night brought its share of unease, he knew he had found a foothold in the civilian world, a testament to resilience, perseverance, and the unwavering support of his father. His friendship with Yura blossomed amidst the shadows and quiet of their night shifts. Yura was more than just a colleague, he was a companion in the eerie hours when the shopping center transformed into a ghostly labyrinth. Their bond grew strong as they shared not only the responsibilities of ensuring security, but also moments of laughter and camaraderie. Yura's easygoing nature and quick wit brought levity to their nightly patrols. He was the mastermind behind harmless pranks and practical jokes that lightened the mood and broke the monotony of their duties. From hiding behind mannequins to setting up impromptu movie nights in the security office, Yura's antics created a sense of familiarity and comfort in the otherwise unsettling environment. The informal atmosphere extended beyond their interactions. It permeated the entire workplace. The security office, their sanctuary amidst the dark corridors, became a hub of shared experiences and whispered confidences. They bonded over shared interests and stories, finding solace in each other's company as they navigated the peculiarities of their nighttime routine. During one particularly still night, their sense of camaraderie was abruptly interrupted by an unexpected inspection. The supervisors arrived unannounced, their presence casting a pall of unease over the otherwise quiet evening. It was a departure from the usual routine checks that occurred predictably and sparingly. The sudden scrutiny sent a ripple of apprehension through them. They exchanged concerned glances, silently questioning whether their vigilance had been enough to evade scrutiny. As the supervisors conducted their inspection, meticulously scrutinizing every aspect of their security protocols, the atmosphere grew tense. Their minds raced with thoughts of potential repercussions, each creak of the floorboards and flicker of the lights magnified in the heightened state of alertness. They maintained their composure, ensuring that every detail was attended to with precision and adherence to protocol. The familiar routines that had once brought comfort now felt scrutinized under the watchful gaze of authority. When the supervisors finally departed, leaving behind a lingering sense of uncertainty, they breathed a collective sigh of relief. The ordeal had tested their resolve and highlighted the precarious balance between diligence and the unexpected. As they resumed their patrols, the shadows seemed darker, and the echoes of the inspection lingered in their minds, a reminder of the unseen forces that lurked in the nocturnal realm they patrolled. During one of their routine patrols through the expansive shopping center, he noticed something out of the ordinary, a shadow that seemed to move independently of any source. It was not the shifting of light or a trick of his tired eyes. This shadow had a fluidity to it, almost as if it had a life of its own. His initial reaction was one of curiosity mixed with apprehension. He approached cautiously, his footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors. As he drew nearer, the shadow seemed to dissipate, melting into the surrounding darkness. Yet the feeling of unease lingered, like a chill running down his spine. He couldn't shake the impression that there was something more to what he had seen, something that defied rational explanation. The incident stayed with him, a lingering doubt in the back of his mind as he continued his patrol through the silent corridors. On another unsettling night, as they conducted their rounds, they stumbled upon a perplexing discovery, a trail of wet footprints leading to Yura's office. The footprints, distinct in their bareness and dampness, seemed to appear out of nowhere, as if someone had walked through water moments before. Their presence was inexplicable and unnerving. Yura, initially dismissive of the find, grew visibly uneasy as they traced the prints back to his office door. The atmosphere in the security office shifted palpably, charged with an unspoken tension. They exchanged uneasy glances, silently acknowledging the strangeness of the situation. The footprints, stark against the tiled floor, raised troubling questions. Who or what had left them? Why had they appeared now, in the dead of night, when the shopping center was supposed to be empty and secure? The unanswered questions hung in the air like a thick fog, obscuring their sense of security and plunging them deeper into a mystery that seemed to defy logic. As they contemplated their next steps, a sense of foreboding settled over them. The night, once familiar and somewhat predictable, now held an uncertainty that sent shivers down their spines. They knew they couldn't ignore the unsettling discovery. It demanded investigation, despite the unsettling implications it held for their perception of reality in the quiet hours of their watch. In the quiet depths of the night, amidst the flickering lights and echoing corridors of the shopping center, they made a chilling discovery. Yura, his steadfast companion through countless shifts, was found lifeless in his office. The sight was shocking, his usually jovial face now frozen in a mask of horror and disbelief. The room seemed to pulse with a palpable sense of dread, the air thick with unanswered questions. As he approached, trembling fingers reaching out in disbelief, he heard a guttural, primal sound that sent icy tendrils of fear snaking down his spine. It was a sound like no other, a deep, menacing growl that seemed to reverberate through the very walls of the office. Panic surged within him as he struggled to comprehend the source of such a terrifying noise in the heart of a supposedly empty shopping center. The realization dawned with a sickening certainty something malevolent lurked within these walls, something that had taken Yura from him in the most brutal and inexplicable manner. He staggered back, mind racing with a torrent of thoughts too horrifying to fully grasp. The night had descended into a nightmare, and the barriers between reality and nightmare blurred into a chilling tableau of darkness and despair. As the night draped its cloak over the sleeping city, he embarked on another solitary vigil within the sprawling confines of the shopping center. The transition from daylight bustle to nocturnal solitude was always abrupt, the echoing silence a stark contrast to the bustling activity of the daytime hours. Equipped with his flashlight and radio, he patrolled the labyrinthine corridors and deserted halls, each step echoing in the quietude of the night. The routine was familiar, yet tinged with anticipation of the unexpected encounters that defied logic and explanation. Shadows danced at the periphery of his vision, shifting and morphing into unsettling shapes that seemed to watch him with unseen eyes. Occasionally, he would encounter remnants of human presence, a discarded item, a misplaced shoe that hinted at fleeting visitors during the closing hours of the center. These encounters, though mundane, carried an air of mystery, reminding him of the transient nature of his nocturnal domain. Yet, amidst the mundane routines, there were moments that defied explanation, sounds that echoed through empty corridors, flickers of movement caught in the corner of his eye. Each incident added to the unsettling tapestry of his nightly patrols, a reminder that he was not alone in the shadows. As the hours wore on, the night revealed its secrets with reluctant reluctance, unraveling a narrative of isolation and unseen forces that lurked in the darkest corners of the shopping center. Each shift brought him closer to the edge of his sanity, where the line between reality and imagination blurred into a haunting melody of fear and fascination. In the dead of night, when the shopping center lay cloaked in silence and shadows, he encountered a being that defied all comprehension. Standing at a towering height of 2 meters, it seemed to materialize out of thin air within the confines of a secluded office. Its form was ethereal yet unnervingly real, a spectral presence that exuded an otherworldly aura. The creature's appearance was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its skin, if it could be called that, shimmered with an iridescent sheen, reflecting the faint light filtering through the frosted windows. Long, sinuous limbs moved with an unsettling grace, as if it were both solid and ephemeral. Its eyes, large and luminous, held a depth that seemed to pierce through to his very soul, radiating a mixture of curiosity and ancient wisdom. Fear gripped him as he stood transfixed by the creature's presence. There was no discernible sound save for the faint hum that seemed to emanate from its very being, filling the room with a surreal ambience. Time seemed to stretch and warp around them, the normal rules of reality bending in the wake of this inexplicable encounter. The night took a sinister turn when the creature, in a sudden burst of aggression, launched itself at Yura with startling speed and ferocity. Its elongated limbs moved with a disturbing fluidity as it seized Yura by the shoulders, overpowering him with unnatural strength. A guttural growl filled the air, drowning out Yura's cries of disbelief and terror. In a horrific twist of fate, the creature tore Yura's head from his body with a savage motion, blood spraying in a gruesome arc that splattered across the floor. The severed head, eyes wide with horror, rolled to a stop at the feet of the stunned security guard. Time seemed to stand still as he stared in shock at the grisly scene unfolding before him, his mind struggling to comprehend the surreal brutality of what had just transpired. The room was engulfed in a suffocating silence broken only by the sound of his own ragged breaths and the faint hum of the creature as it retreated back into the shadows. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the palpable weight of fear. Reality had fractured irreparably, leaving him standing alone amidst the chilling remnants of a night that had descended into unimaginable horror. Haunted by the memory of Yura's lifeless gaze and the echoing roar of the creature, he knew that the boundaries between the known and the unknown had been irrevocably shattered. In the wake of this harrowing ordeal, he was left to grapple with the terrifying realization that some secrets were not meant to be uncovered, and some entities were not meant to be encountered by mortal eyes. As the horrific reality of what he had witnessed sank in, the security guard's instincts kicked into overdrive. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, he sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors of the shopping center, his mind racing to formulate a plan. Every twist and turn was a calculated move, leveraging his knowledge of the building's layout and his physical capabilities. His strategy was born out of necessity, a desperate bid for survival in the face of an unimaginable threat. He veered towards areas he knew provided potential escape routes, stairwells, service corridors, any path that might offer a momentary advantage over his relentless pursuer. The weight of fear bore down on him with each pounding step, driving him forward, even as panic threatened to overwhelm his senses. Navigating through the darkened halls, he avoided areas where the creature's presence had been felt most keenly, hoping to stay one step ahead of its relentless pursuit. His breath came in ragged gasps, each heartbeat a drumbeat of urgency echoing in the empty spaces around him. Time seemed both stretched and compressed, the seconds ticking by in slow motion while urgency propelled him onward. On the second floor, the chase escalated into a harrowing battle for survival. The creature, fueled by primal aggression, closed in with terrifying speed. It smashed through doors as if they were paper, its sheer force leaving splintered wood and twisted metal in its wake. Each impact reverberated through the building, amplifying the sense of imminent danger. The air crackled with tension as the security guard frantically sought refuge, his options dwindling with each passing moment. He could feel the creature's presence looming closer, a malevolent force that seemed to bend reality itself. Shadows danced and flickered around him, casting eerie silhouettes against the walls as he pressed on, driven by sheer instinct and a primal will to survive. The chase became a desperate dance of evasion and confrontation. He ducked into alcoves and dashed down side corridors, always staying on the move to avoid becoming cornered. The creature's roars echoed through the halls, chilling him to the bone with their sheer ferocity and menace. Every fleeting moment of respite was punctuated by the relentless pursuit, a relentless reminder that his every breath could be his last. As the night wore on, the battle for survival intensified into a test of endurance and resilience. Each encounter with the creature brought him closer to the brink of exhaustion, yet he fought on with a determination born of sheer survival instinct. The second floor became a battleground, a visceral symphony of fear and adrenaline, where the line between predator and prey blurred into a heart-pounding struggle for life itself. Just as his strength was beginning to wane and the creature closed in for what seemed like the final, fatal encounter, the piercing sound of police sirens shattered the oppressive silence. The flashing red and blue lights outside the shopping center windows brought a fleeting sense of hope. Moments later, the pounding of boots echoed through the halls, heralding the arrival of law enforcement. The creature, sensing the approach of a new threat, hesitated. Its malevolent eyes flicked towards the source of the noise, and with a final, guttural growl, it retreated into the shadows from whence it came. The security guard, breathless and battered, slumped against the wall as police officers stormed the building, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The officers found him in a state of shock, eyes wide with terror and disbelief. As they secured the area, their radios crackled with reports and urgent commands. The guard's relief was palpable. He was safe, for now. The presence of the police had driven away the nightmarish entity, rescuing him from the brink of death. The aftermath of the night's horrors left a heavy toll. The loss of Yura, his colleague and friend, was a blow that weighed heavily on his soul. The image of Yura's lifeless body, and the terror etched into his face, haunted the guard's every waking moment and invaded his dreams. The psychological scars ran deep, far beyond the immediate shock and fear. Returning to work seemed impossible. Each corner of the shopping center was a grim reminder of the terror that had unfolded. The once familiar and somewhat comforting routine of night patrols had turned into a source of dread. The thought of encountering the creature again, or another night of inexplicable horror, was too much to bear. With a heavy heart, he handed in his resignation. The decision was not easy, but it was necessary for his mental and emotional well-being. He knew he needed to leave behind the dark memories and start anew, away from the shadows that haunted the shopping center. The experience had changed him profoundly. His priorities shifted, and he began to seek solace in the company of loved ones, valuing the fragile, precious nature of life. The ordeal taught him the importance of cherishing each moment, finding strength in human connections, and understanding the limits of human comprehension in the face of the unknown. As he walked away from the shopping center for the last time, he couldn't help but glance back, a mixture of relief and sorrow in his eyes. The building stood silent and imposing against the night sky, a monument to the terrifying experiences that had pushed him to reevaluate his life. Though the memories would never truly fade, he knew he was taking the first step towards healing and reclaiming his sense of self. In the wake of the horrifying events, the mystery of the creature's origins and motives loomed large in the security guard's mind. The creature's sudden appearance and its inexplicable aggression left a trail of unanswered questions that gnawed at him, even as he tried to rebuild his life away from the shopping center. The nature of the entity defied all rational explanation. It was unlike anything he had ever encountered or even imagined, a being of such raw, primal terror that it seemed to belong to another realm entirely. Where had it come from? Why had it chosen that night, that place, to manifest and wreak havoc? These questions haunted him as much as the memory of Yura's death. Despite the trauma, there was a part of him that yearned for answers. He scoured news reports and local lore, searching for any clue that might shed light on the creature's origins. Were there other sightings? Other victims? The more he delved into the mystery, the more elusive the answers became. It was as if the creature had slipped through the cracks of reality, leaving only a trail of fear and destruction in its wake. Some speculated that the creature was an ancient entity, awakened by some disturbance within the shopping center. Others suggested it was a manifestation of something darker, a physical embodiment of the fears and anxieties that lurked within the human psyche. The theories were as varied as they were unsettling, each one adding another layer to the enigma. The guard's own encounters provided little in the way of concrete answers. The creature's actions were brutal and direct, driven by a malevolent intelligence that seemed to take pleasure in the suffering it inflicted. Yet there was no clear motive, no discernible pattern to its attacks. It struck with a randomness that was as terrifying as its physical presence. The police, too, were left baffled. Their investigation turned up scant evidence, no signs of forced entry, no traces of the creature's origin or nature. The security footage, marred by static and interference, offered only fleeting glimpses of the entity, further complicating efforts to understand what had happened. The case remained open, an unresolved anomaly that defied their best efforts to explain. In the end, the creature remained an enigma, a dark mystery that refused to be unraveled. The security guard, though forever changed by his encounter, knew that some questions might never be answered. The nightmarish experience had left him with a deep respect for the unknown, a humbling reminder of the limits of human understanding. As he moved forward, he carried with him the knowledge that there were forces in the world that operated beyond the realm of comprehension. The creature, with its unfathomable motives and origins, was a stark reminder of the fragility of human existence and the thin veil that separated the ordinary from the extraordinary. In the quiet moments of reflection, he found a strange solace in accepting that some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved, their shadows a testament to the vast, uncharted depths of the unknown. From the start of their married life, the relationship between him and his wife began to unravel. The vibrant bond they once shared eroded, replaced by a tense and cold atmosphere. The warmth and connection faded, leaving a void where romance and intimacy once thrived. Their home became a battleground of unspoken grievances and simmering resentment. Conversations turned into curt exchanges filled with tension. Affection became rare, and their physical closeness suffered. The bed they shared a place of restless sleep and silent nights. The roots of their discord lay in everyday conflicts. Trivial disagreements over chores escalated into full-blown arguments, each chipping away at their relationship. Petty squabbles over inconsequential matters fueled a cycle of frustration and bitterness. He was constantly on edge, anticipating the next clash, while his wife seemed perpetually agitated. The stress of maintaining their household and work pressures exacerbated the situation, breaking down their communication. Emotionally, both felt unheard and unappreciated. The love that once bonded them was overshadowed by dissatisfaction and disappointment. The absence of romance and sexual intimacy became a glaring symptom of their disconnect. Their crisis was a slow, insidious process marked by 1,000 small cuts rather than any single event. Each unresolved issue and unkind word deepened the gulf between them. In moments of reflection, he wondered if reconciliation was possible, but the path seemed daunting, burdened by their shared discontent. The journey back would require confronting the fears and insecurities that had driven them apart, a prospect as terrifying as any nightmare. As the cracks in their relationship widened, the protagonist found himself plagued by gnawing doubts. His wife's distant behavior and the growing emotional chasm between them fed his suspicions. The thought of infidelity crept into his mind, refusing to let go. Each unexplained absence, each secretive phone call, seemed to confirm his worst fears. Driven by a desperate need for clarity, he resorted to methods he never imagined he would use. Late at night, when the house was shrouded in silence, he meticulously combed through her phone and computer. His heart pounded with a mix of dread and anticipation as he scoured her messages and emails. Every innocent text was dissected, every social media interaction scrutinized. Despite his thorough investigation, he found no evidence of an affair. There were no incriminating messages, no hidden conversations. Yet, instead of bringing relief, the absence of proof only deepened his anxiety. He began to question his own judgment, the seeds of paranoia sprouting uncontrollably. The lack of tangible evidence did nothing to dispel his fears, leaving him trapped in a web of uncertainty and mistrust. The strain of their deteriorating relationship took its toll, leading him to seek refuge away from home. The constant tension and unresolved conflicts became too much to bear. Rather than face the daily barrage of arguments and accusations, he began to extend his hours at work. The office, once a place of routine, became a sanctuary from the turmoil that awaited him at home. His late returns became more frequent, each one a deliberate attempt to delay the inevitable confrontations. He would immerse himself in tasks, finding solace in the structure and predictability of his job. The hum of the office, the rhythm of paperwork, offered a temporary escape from the chaos of his personal life. At home, his absences were keenly felt. The void left by his late arrivals and extended work hours only exacerbated the existing tensions. His wife, already distant, grew more resentful. The once cozy evenings turned into solitary nights, filled with silent recriminations and unspoken words. Their home, once a haven, became a place of isolation and estrangement. The avoidance, however, was a double-edged sword. While it provided momentary relief, it also deepened the rift between them. Each night spent away from home was a night lost in their battle to salvage their relationship. The distance he sought as a refuge became a barrier, solidifying the emotional disconnect that had taken root. In his heart, he knew that avoidance was not a solution. Yet the fear of confrontation, of facing the reality of their fractured marriage, kept him in a cycle of evasion. He was trapped between the dread of returning home and the guilt of staying away, a prisoner of his own making. The silent drive home each night became a journey through a landscape of fear and regret, the darkness of the night mirroring the darkness within his soul. Despite their mounting difficulties, he clung to a glimmer of hope. He remembered the early days of their marriage filled with love and laughter and believed they could reclaim that happiness. Determined to mend their relationship, he initiated conversations and suggested counseling. He made efforts to come home earlier and spend more time with his wife. Their interactions, though still strained, began to show small signs of improvement. The simple act of having dinner together symbolized his commitment to making things right. A turning point came with a trip to visit his grandmother in a small rural town. The long journey gave them time to talk, free from usual distractions. The familiar countryside scenery provided a calming backdrop. Upon arrival, they were welcomed by his grandmother's warm embrace and home-cooked meals. The simplicity of life there offered a much-needed respite, encouraging reflection and connection. During their stay, they faced challenges that required teamwork. Fixing the leaky roof and tending to the garden brought them closer. Evenings on the porch, sharing stories, allowed them to reconnect on a deeper level. The trip reminded them of the love that had brought them together and showed they could still find common ground. Returning home, they carried a renewed sense of purpose and commitment. While challenges remained, there was a noticeable shift. They approached conflicts with more patience and understanding, drawing on the teamwork they had rediscovered. Their home began to feel warm and inviting again. The road to recovery was long, but they were walking it together, hand in hand, with hope lighting their way. The trip to his grandmother's countryside home brought unexpected peace. The tranquil surroundings offered a stark contrast to their chaotic city life. Fresh air, the scent of pine, and birdsong replaced the urban noise. The simplicity of rural life helped them relax and unwind. His grandmother's quaint cottage, nestled among rolling hills, became a haven of warmth and nostalgia. They spent days walking through fields, sitting by the river, and helping with small tasks. The natural beauty and physical work provided a distraction from their troubles, creating a space for open communication. They shared stories and laughed together again, rekindling their lost connection. During their stay, he noticed changes in his grandmother. Once strong and vibrant, she now moved slower, her hands gnarled from years of work. Her silver hair and deep lines spoke of a long, full life. These signs of aging stirred nostalgia and regret in him. He remembered childhood visits when she seemed invincible, always bustling around the kitchen or garden. Seeing her now, frailer but still full of warmth and wisdom, made him aware of time's passage. It was a reminder of the precious moments with loved ones. Her eyes still held the same love and strength. She continued to offer wisdom and support, encouraging him to cherish his marriage. Her unwavering spirit inspired him. One evening, as they watched the sunset, she shared stories of her own marriage, filled with humor, love, and resilience. Her tales of patience, understanding, and forgiveness resonated deeply. Time in the countryside brought new perspective. It highlighted life's fleeting nature and the enduring power of love and family. He realized conflicts could be overcome with effort and compassion. The trip became a turning point, reminding him of his values and commitment to his wife. As they left, he felt renewed purpose. The peaceful days and his grandmother's wisdom reignited his determination to rebuild his relationship. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to face it, drawing strength from past lessons and loved ones' support. The narrator observed his grandmother's profound physical and psychological changes with a mixture of concern and sadness. Age had taken its toll, leaving her frail and slow-moving, her once sharp eyes now distant and cloudy. She struggled with arthritis, her trembling hands a testament to years of wear. Psychologically, she showed signs of confusion and anxiety, often mistaking him for others and exhibiting erratic behaviors that were unsettling. Her behavior became increasingly unpredictable and fearful, leaving him uneasy. She would check locks repeatedly, fearing intruders, and spend hours staring at old photos or gazing fearfully out the window. One night he found her standing in fear by the door, muttering about keeping them out. Another time, she frantically searched the attic, convinced of impending danger. Her sleep was troubled, filled with shouts and arguments with unseen entities, leaving him shaken and questioning reality. The relationship between the main character and his wife, Vika, came under strain due to the unexpected behavior of their grandmother and a series of strange events. What once seemed like a reliable and stable foundation of their family life now began to crack under the influence of unusual circumstances. Vika struggled to support her husband in this situation, often feeling exhausted and unable to make sense of what was happening. Their time together became filled with anxiety and uncertainty, and their ordinary life started to dissolve under the pressure of external circumstances. The narrator describes the internal struggle he faces, finding himself in a situation full of unexplainable events. He battles fear, worry, and the desire to maintain composure and clarity of mind in the face of the unknown. He tries to unravel the mysteries surrounding his family and their future, without fully understanding what is happening and without finding answers to the questions that trouble him. All of this creates internal tension, which only intensifies with each new twist in events. The grandmother plays a significant role in preserving family traditions and knowledge passed down through generations. Her determination to impart her experience and care for the family is reflected in her actions and words, reminding everyone of the importance of family values and history. Her presence becomes a crucial element in maintaining family bonds, despite all the trials they face. The narrative unfolds with an undercurrent of mysticism and unexplainable occurrences that leave the main characters, particularly the narrator and his wife Vika, grappling with fear and confusion. The presence of the grandmother becomes a focal point of inexplicable phenomena, introducing elements that challenge the characters' understanding of reality. Shadows flicker where there should be light, and the once familiar becomes tinged with an eerie uncertainty. The grandmother's behavior, veering from the usual patterns of aging, introduces a sense of unease that permeates their interactions. Strange occurrences manifest, objects move inexplicably, whispers echo through empty rooms, and time seems to bend to an unfamiliar rhythm. These supernatural elements not only unsettle the characters, but also compel them to confront their deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Amidst the unsettling events, the relationship dynamics between the narrator and Vika undergo profound changes. They find themselves drawn into a shared journey of reevaluation, questioning their perceptions of family ties and personal beliefs. The grandmother, once a pillar of stability, now embodies a mysterious presence that tests their emotional resilience and forces them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and each other. Their conversations, once filled with mundane details of daily life, now pivot around the unsettling experiences they witness together. The bond between husband and wife is strained as they navigate the labyrinthine corridors of uncertainty and attempt to decipher the cryptic messages embedded in the grandmother's cryptic utterances and erratic behavior. Returning home after their encounter with the inexplicable, the main characters enter a new phase in their relationship. The events with the grandmother linger in their minds, casting a haunting shadow over their domesticity. Despite the lingering fear and uncertainty, they are determined to preserve their familial ties and uphold the traditions that have defined their heritage. The narrative unfolds as a testament to the enduring resilience of familial bonds amidst adversity. As they navigate the labyrinth of uncertainty, the characters find solace in their shared history and the strength derived from confronting the unknown together. The grandmother's enigmatic presence becomes a catalyst for introspection and growth, prompting them to forge deeper connections with their past while embracing the challenges of an uncertain future. In essence, the story weaves a tapestry of fear, mystery, and resilience, showcasing how the inexplicable can reshape relationships and redefine perceptions of reality. It explores the delicate balance between the tangible and the intangible, urging readers to contemplate the deeper meaning behind the unsettling events that unfold in the characters' lives. The narrative begins with a seemingly ordinary dinner conversation between the protagonist and his wife, Vika. They engage in casual banter about food choices and ingredients, aiming to cultivate a sense of normalcy and domestic comfort. This initial setting serves to establish a familiar backdrop against which the unfolding events will starkly contrast. The tranquility abruptly shatters when Vika returns home carrying several packages, their contents grotesquely revealed as human meat and a severed head. The protagonist, initially engaged in lighthearted conversation, is suddenly thrust into a surreal and horrifying reality. The contrast between the mundane topics discussed moments earlier and the gruesome discovery amplifies the shock and confusion experienced by both the protagonist and the reader alike. This sudden twist not only disturbs the protagonist's sense of reality, but also challenges the reader's perception of the narrative's direction. Overwhelmed by the grotesque scene unfolding before him, the protagonist is rendered immobile by a mixture of disbelief and sheer terror. His mind struggles to process the inconceivable sight of Vika calmly handling human remains in their own kitchen. This moment of paralyzing fear and confusion encapsulates the protagonist's descent into emotional turmoil and psychological chaos. The tension is palpable as the protagonist grapples with the realization that his once normal life has been irrevocably disrupted by a macabre and inexplicable turn of events. The scene is fraught with an eerie stillness, punctuated only by the protagonist's internal turmoil and the chilling reality of the human remains in their midst. Vika, in a chilling display of detachment, meticulously erased all evidence of her gruesome activities. She left behind a conspicuously placed package containing tomato juice mixed with human remains, a deliberate gesture that underscored her unnervingly indifferent nature. The juxtaposition of domesticity and horror heightened the sense of dread as the hero struggled to comprehend the implications of her actions. Each discarded trace spoke volumes of her methodical approach, leaving the hero frozen in disbelief at the monstrous reality unfolding before him. Day after day, the hero unwittingly consumed meals prepared with human flesh, ignorant of its origin until the unsettling truth revealed itself. The visceral shock and revulsion that overcame him were compounded by the realization of how deep his ignorance had plunged him into a macabre nightmare. Each morsel consumed became a testament to his unwitting participation in a ghastly ritual, shaking his sanity and unraveling his sense of security. His mind reeled with questions and horror, grappling with the psychological weight of his unwitting complicity. The crescendo of horror reached its peak when Vika unexpectedly returned home early one fateful evening. In a cruel twist of fate, she stumbled upon her husband's attempt to salvage a semblance of normalcy, hidden away in the closet as he prepared a surprise for her. The stark contrast between the planned gesture of love and the sinister reality shattered any remaining illusion of normalcy. Caught in the act of concealing the truth, the hero faced an irrevocable fracture in trust and an abyss of incomprehensible horror. The sudden confrontation laid bare the raw, unspoken tensions that had been festering beneath the surface, leaving both characters entangled in a web of deception and moral decay. In a desperate bid to salvage what remains of their once harmonious relationship, the protagonist undertakes a poignant gesture, gifting Vika a piece of exquisite jewelry. This act is not merely an attempt to reconcile with his wife, but a poignant plea for normalcy amidst the unsettling chaos that has engulfed their lives. The jewelry, with its shimmering elegance, symbolizes his yearning to reclaim the warmth and familiarity of their bond, now shattered by the grotesque revelation that has shattered their world. As the dust settles on the tumultuous events, the protagonist finds himself adrift in a tempest of emotions. Fear, born of the horrifying truths unearthed, grips him relentlessly. Horror, at the stark reality of what Vika has been orchestrating in their very home, pierces through his psyche like a cold blade. Yet amidst these turbulent currents, there lingers a profound sense of introspection. He wrestles with the dissonance between his desire to reconcile with Vika and the visceral revulsion that her actions have evoked. The aftermath of the revelation becomes a crucible of inner conflict, where the protagonist confronts not only the monstrous deeds of his wife, but also his own capacity for forgiveness and understanding. The kitchen, once a sanctuary of warmth and nourishment, now transforms into a macabre theater of horrors. Here, the protagonist unwittingly becomes a witness to Vika's grisly culinary preparations, where human remains are brazenly incorporated into her cooking. The sight of bloodied flesh and bone, juxtaposed against the mundane backdrop of their domesticity, shatters his perception of reality. The grotesque tableau unfolds before his eyes, plunging him into a nightmarish realm where the boundaries between sanity and madness blur. The revelation not only defies reason but also dismantles the very foundation of trust and intimacy that once defined their marriage. Each narrative thread weaves together a tapestry of suspense and psychological turmoil, painting a vivid portrait of a protagonist grappling with the fallout of a horrifying discovery. As he navigates through the aftermath, he is compelled to confront his deepest fears, reconcile conflicting emotions, and ultimately redefine his understanding of love, trust, and the human psyche in the face of unimaginable horror. As the protagonist comes to grips with the horrifying truth, Vika's demeanor takes a chilling turn. She notices his growing realization and issues a chilling threat, her voice laced with a venomous edge. With a steely resolve, she warns him against any attempt to escape or seek help, casting a suffocating shadow over his already besieged mind. Her words, tinged with menace, reverberate through the air like an ominous premonition, amplifying the sense of dread that now permeates their once familiar surroundings. In a harrowing moment of disbelief and terror, Vika undergoes a grotesque metamorphosis before the protagonist's eyes. Her visage contorts unnaturally, dark patches marring her once serene features. Her eyes blaze with an otherworldly yellow glow, casting an eerie illumination in the dim room. As the transformation unfolds, her limbs elongate unnaturally, twisting into grotesque proportions that defy all reason. The protagonist stands frozen in horror, witnessing a surreal spectacle that shatters his perception of reality and plunges him deeper into a nightmarish realm. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, the protagonist faces a desperate battle for survival. He strikes out in self-defense, mustering every ounce of strength to fend off Vika's monstrous form. Amidst the chaos and confusion, he manages to land a decisive blow, stunning her momentarily. Seizing the fleeting opportunity, he flees from their apartment, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The echoes of their tumultuous struggle reverberate in the air, leaving Vika incapacitated and powerless in the wake of his daring escape. Each unfolding moment in this chilling narrative grips the reader with suspense and horror, painting a vivid tableau of supernatural terror and human resilience. As the protagonist grapples with the unfathomable horrors unleashed by Vika's transformation, he navigates a perilous path to survival, haunted by the malevolent forces that have upended his once ordinary existence. Following the harrowing ordeal, the protagonist frantically calls the police, recounting the chilling truth of Vika's monstrous transformation and the grotesque evidence of her actions. Despite his earnest pleas and detailed account, the authorities find no traces of crime or human remains in the refrigerator. The lack of physical evidence contradicts the horrifying reality he witnessed, leaving him bewildered and increasingly isolated in his fight for justice. The police dismiss the protagonist's claims as delusions, attributing his disturbed state to possible mental health issues. Despite his insistence on the supernatural horror that unfolded before him, they propose a psychiatric evaluation, viewing his narrative as a product of psychological distress rather than a valid account of paranormal terror. The chilling indifference of the authorities deepens his sense of isolation and disbelief, further complicating his quest for validation and safety. Haunted by the traumatic events and disillusioned by the lack of support, the protagonist makes a drastic decision to relocate. He changes his residence and phone number, desperate to sever ties with the nightmarish past and forge a new existence far from the malevolent forces that once threatened his sanity. Amidst the lingering fear and uncertainty, he clings to a fragile hope of starting afresh, navigating a fragile path between lingering trauma and the elusive promise of peace. In this gripping narrative of supernatural horror, the protagonist's journey unfolds against a backdrop of disbelief and personal upheaval, underscoring the enduring struggle between perceived reality and unseen terror. As he grapples with the aftermath of Vika's monstrous transformation and the indifference of authority, he confronts the daunting task of rebuilding his life amidst the haunting specter of unresolved terror. Despite taking all precautions, Vika re-emerges into his life at the most unexpected moment, a stark reminder that he cannot escape his nightmare. Her sudden reappearance shatters the fragile semblance of normalcy he painstakingly built, plunging him back into the chilling reality of her menacing presence. The protagonist finds himself ensnared once more in the grip of fear and uncertainty, grappling with the unsettling certainty that some horrors defy escape. Driven by a desperate quest for answers, the protagonist journeys to the village where his wife's grandmother once lived, hoping to unravel the mystery behind her disturbing transformation. To his dismay, he discovers the village abandoned, its eerie silence amplifying his growing unease. Further inquiries lead him to a startling revelation: Vika's grandmother passed away 6 months earlier under mysterious circumstances, casting a haunting shadow over the secrets concealed within her lineage. The unnerving realization dawns upon him that the source of Vika's unsettling metamorphosis lies buried in the darkness of her family's history, beckoning him deeper into a labyrinth of unanswered questions. In a grim and macabre turn of events, the protagonist uncovers the gruesome remains of Vika's grandmother in a state of advanced decay, a grotesque mass of rotting flesh that defies comprehension. The horrific sight offers a chilling explanation for Vika's inexplicable behavior following her grandmother's demise, hinting at a sinister legacy that transcends the boundaries of life and death. As he confronts the grotesque aftermath of his discoveries, the protagonist grapples with the unsettling realization that the true horror may lie not in the supernatural, but in the harrowing depths of human frailty and ancestral secrets. In this riveting tale of unearthly terror, the protagonist's relentless pursuit of truth unravels a tapestry of darkness woven from familial legacy and the relentless specter of the unknown. Amidst the eerie echoes of a forsaken village and the macabre revelation of a decaying matriarch, he confronts the daunting reality that some nightmares are woven into the very fabric of existence, haunting his every step with the lingering promise of unspeakable truths. Returning home after a harrowing day, the protagonist is gripped by a chilling realization the mysterious entity haunting him has returned, its presence looming ominously in the shadows. Desperate for solace and protection from this relentless nightmare, he resolves to seek refuge in the sanctuary of a nearby church. The dimly lit corridors and hallowed halls offer a semblance of sanctuary against the encroaching darkness that has engulfed his life. With each step towards the church, his heartbeat quickens in rhythm with his escalating fear. The weight of unseen eyes bearing down upon him intensifies, a spectral menace that defies rational explanation. The church bells toll mournfully as he crosses the threshold, a poignant reminder of the solemnity that awaits within. Seeking solace in the flickering candlelight, he kneels in silent supplication, fervently praying for deliverance from the malevolent forces that threaten to consume him. The ancient stones of the church seem to whisper tales of forgotten battles between light and shadow, echoing his own inner turmoil. A gust of cold wind sweeps through the nave, stirring the ancient dust and carrying with it a chilling reminder of unseen presences lingering in the ethereal realm. The protagonist's trembling hands clutch the rosary, seeking solace in its familiar form as he struggles to reconcile the inexplicable terror that has invaded his life. As midnight approaches, the church becomes a bastion against the encroaching darkness, a beacon of hope amidst the tumultuous storm of his fears. The echoes of his whispered prayers reverberate off the vaulted ceilings, mingling with the faint rustle of unseen wings that haunt the shadows. In the flickering candlelight, he glimpses fleeting apparitions that flicker at the edge of perception, manifestations of his deepest anxieties made manifest in the sacred space. In this haunting tale of supernatural suspense, the protagonist's desperate quest for refuge within the church's protective embrace underscores the timeless struggle between faith and fear. As he confronts the malevolent entity that has invaded his life, he discovers that salvation may lie not in the sanctuary of the church alone, but in the unwavering resilience of the human spirit against the relentless onslaught of darkness.